I deny any involvement with you and that child.
How can you say that?
I deny it.
This is outrageous. You have to eat up fast so I can drop you at the airport.
Thanks, it looks amazing.
Hurry up!
I'm on it.
I'm gonna miss you so much.
Me too, but we'll be together again soon.
I know, I love you.
I love you too.
The courtroom in New York County Supreme Court was already full before the judge even stepped in. Reporters lined the hallway outside. Camera flashes burst against the marble walls. A billionaire divorce always draws a crowd. But this one felt different. At the front of the room stood Stefan Volkova, tech magnate, media, darling, the man Forbes once called New York's youngest visionary. His tailored charcoal suit fit him like certainty, controlled, untouchable. Beside him stood his fiancée, Victoria Hale, poised, elegant, one manicured hand resting lightly on his arm, as if she already owned the future. Stefan leaned slightly toward his attorney. "Let's finish this today," he muttered. Calm, flat. He did not look nervous. He did not look guilty. He looked finished. And that's when the doors opened. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a soft creak. A few heads turned. Then more. Then all of them. A woman stepped inside, pale, composed, breathing carefully, like every inhale had to be negotiated. Beatrice. She wasn't dressed for spectacle. No designer label, no dramatic entrance, just a simple cream coat. And in her arms, a newborn. The room shifted. Victoria's fingers tightened slightly around Stefan's sleeve. Not obvious, just enough. Stefan didn't turn at first. He heard the murmur ripple through the benches. He exhaled once, impatient. He murmured, glancing over his shoulder, and then he saw her. For a second, just a second, the billionaire forgot how to move. Welcome back to Mr. Austin Love and Story Tales, where life's most powerful lessons come wrapped in unforgettable stories, the kind that don't just entertain you, but stay with you. Have you ever wondered what happens when two worlds collide? When wealth meets humility? When promises are abandoned, and silence becomes louder than truth? Well, today's story isn't comfortable. It's about choices. It's about responsibility. It's about showing up, even when your hands are shaking. If you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, especially stories about women who refuse to disappear, go ahead and like this video right now. Comment where you're watching from, and subscribe, because it truly helps this channel grow and push these stories to more people who need them. Trust me, you're going to want to stay until the end, because the baby hadn't cried yet. And when she did, everything stopped. For a moment, nothing moved. Beatrice didn't rush forward. She didn't speak. She just stood there, holding the child close to her chest, one palm supporting the tiny head with instinctive care. Stefan's jaw tightened. His eyes traveled, slowly, from her face, down to the bundle wrapped in soft white fabric. Victoria leaned closer to him. "Do you know her?" she whispered, almost smiling. Almost. He didn't answer. He couldn't, because that's when it happened. A small sound, soft at first, then sharper. The newborn stirred, shifted, and let out a cry. Not loud, not dramatic, just raw, hungry, alive. The sound sliced clean through the courtroom air. The judge paused mid-sentence. A pen dropped somewhere in the back row. Stefan turned fully now. His expression changed, not into anger, not into confusion. Recognition. He stepped forward without meaning to. One step, then stopped. His breath faltered. The baby cried again, fists tightening, face scrunching. And when Stefan looked closer, really looked, his chest stopped rising. The eyes, those eyes, dark, focused, familiar, the exact shade he saw every morning in his own reflection. Victoria's fingers dug harder into his arm. "Stefan." Her voice lost its polish. He didn't respond. His world had narrowed to that child. Beatrice adjusted the blanket gently, whispering something under her breath. "It's okay. It's okay, sweetheart. The baby quieted slightly, still trembling, small hiccups breaking through. The courtroom felt too small now, too tight. The judge cleared his throat. "Ma'am, this is a legal proceeding. If you have something to present, you may step forward." Beatrice lifted her chin. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't tremble loudly. It carried quietly. "I'm here because he filed for divorce," she said. A pause, a breath, and he forgot to mention. "He has a daughter." Silence. Victoria's hand slipped away from Stefan's arm. Stefan swallowed hard. His voice came out thin. "Beatrice, what are you doing?" She met his eyes. Not angry, not pleading, just steady. "Well," she exhaled slowly, "I thought today was about the truth." The baby shifted again, making a small cooing sound, softer now, calmer. And for the first time since she walked in, Stefan looked afraid. "Let me ask you something. Have you ever been promised forever, only to wake up one morning and realize forever had an expiration date? Have you ever trusted someone so completely that you built your future around their words, only to find yourself holding the consequences alone? Because that's what this is really about. Not money, not headlines, not power. It's about a woman who stayed quiet for months, maybe longer, while the man who once called her home built a new life in front of cameras. What happens when the person who left you becomes one of the most powerful men in New York City and acts like you were just a chapter he can edit out? What do you do when your child grows and starts asking questions? Questions like, "Where's my dad?" Beatrice didn't come to beg. She didn't come to destroy him. She came because silence has weight, and eventually it becomes too heavy to carry alone. Inside that courtroom, people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some avoided eye contact. Others leaned forward, sensing something irreversible was unfolding. Stefan stood frozen, a man who could command boardrooms, negotiate billion-dollar deals, influence markets. But he couldn't command this moment. He couldn't control a baby's cry. He couldn't erase her existence. And maybe that's the point. Sometimes the most powerful thing in a room isn't wealth, it's truth. So let me ask you, honestly, if you were her, would you stay silent to protect his image? Or would you walk through those doors, even if your hands were shaking, even if your voice cracked, even if the whole world was watching? If you believe accountability matters, if you believe children deserve recognition, not secrecy, go ahead and like this video right now. It helps stories like this reach more people. Drop a comment below. Would you have shown up? And make sure you're subscribed to Mr. Austin Love and Story Tales. Because what unfolds next isn't simple, it isn't clean, and it certainly isn't comfortable. Because the judge was about to ask a question, Stefan wasn't prepared to answer. And the answer, well, it would cost him more than money. The judge adjusted his glasses slowly, studying Beatrice, then Stefan, then the child. His voice was measured. "Mr. Volkova," he said carefully, "is this child yours?" No one breathed. Stefan's attorney leaned in quickly. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. Is the child yours?" The judge repeated. Stefan opened his mouth, closed it. His throat moved, but no sound came out. Victoria stared at him now, not confused anymore. Searching, waiting. "Stefan?" she whispered. He finally forced air into his lungs. I don't know." The words landed flat. Beatrice let out the smallest sound. Not a laugh, not a sob, just disappointment. "Well," she said softly, shifting the baby slightly in her arms. "That's interesting." The newborn stirred again, blinking slowly as if unaware she had just changed the trajectory of 3 lives. Beatrice reached into her coat pocket carefully, pulling out a sealed envelope. Her hand trembled, just slightly. She steadied it. "There's a DNA test," she said. "Court admissible. Conducted last week." The courtroom buzzed. Stefan's face drained of color. He took a half step back. "You did this without telling me?" Her eyes didn't leave his. "You left without telling me," she replied quietly. A pause. Not loud, but heavy. Victoria removed her hand from Stefan's arm completely now. It fell to her side, fingers curling inwards slowly. "You said there was nothing," she murmured to him. "You told me she was just someone from your past." Stefan's composure fractured, not dramatically, but in small, visible cracks. "I didn't know," he said weakly. You didn't ask," Beatrice corrected. Silence again. The judge cleared his throat once more. "This court will review the documentation. Until then, proceedings are temporarily suspended." The gavel struck. Sharp, final, and just like that, the billionaire who controlled everything controlled nothing. Beatrice turned slightly, adjusting the blanket around her daughter. She didn't look victorious. She didn't look cruel. She looked tired, strong, certain, and as she walked toward the exit, cameras already flashing outside the courtroom doors, Stefan stood rooted to the floor, watching the one thing he thought he could walk away from him. Sometimes consequences don't arrive loudly. Sometimes they show up quietly, wrapped in a blanket. The marble steps outside New York County Supreme Court were crowded long before the hearing was scheduled to begin. Not just journalists, not just legal aides, investors, bloggers, even a few curious onlookers who had taken an early lunch break from nearby offices in Lower Manhattan. A billionaire divorce attracts gravity. Satellite vans lined Center Street. Microphones branded with national network logos were angled toward the entrance. A young reporter rehearsed into her camera, adjusting her blazer. Today marks the official dissolution of one of New York's most talked-about private marriages. Inside, security was tighter than usual. Phones were silenced. Bags checked twice. The courtroom itself carried that old New York weight. High ceilings, polished wood benches, the faint smell of paper and polish. Sunlight filtered in through tall windows, catching particles of dust mid-air. Everything looked orderly, controlled, predictable. The clerk organized documents with steady efficiency. Attorneys murmured in low tones. A court officer leaned casually near the wall, arms folded. But beneath the surface, there was tension. You could feel it in the way people kept glancing toward the double doors. Because today wasn't just paperwork. It was reputation. It was image. It was legacy. And somewhere in that building, a man who built an empire from a coding startup in a Brooklyn basement was about to finalize the end of a marriage he barely acknowledged publicly. Funny how success multiplies attention, but silence multiplies consequences. A faint echo of footsteps approached from the corridor. Heads turned instinctively. The air shifted slightly. Not yet the disruption, but close. At the front of the courtroom stood Stefan Volkova, 34. Controlled posture, dark, tailored suit. Silver cufflinks engraved with subtle initials, SV. His presence was calm, almost clinical. This wasn't his first high-stakes room. Boardrooms, investor summits, tech conferences in San Francisco and Chicago, panels at Forbes events. He knew how to occupy space without raising his voice. Victoria Hale stood beside him. Ivory blazer, pearl earrings, composed expression sharpened by years of navigating high society in Manhattan. She leaned slightly toward him. "After today," she murmured softly, "we can finally move forward." Her tone wasn't cruel, just certain. Stefan gave a short nod. Yes, after today. His attorney, Mr. Halpern, adjusted his glasses. The settlement terms are straightforward. Minimal contest. Quick signature. Will be done before lunch. Stefan exhaled through his nose. Efficient. That's what this was supposed to be. Efficient closure. He avoided looking at the public seating area, avoided scanning the doorway. Because some part of him, small, inconvenient, didn't like unfinished things. Victoria squeezed his forearm lightly. "You're quiet." "I'm fine," he replied. A pause. He rolled his shoulders once, loosening tension he didn't want to acknowledge. "Well, let's just finish it." The clerk called the case number. Chairs creaked as observers adjusted. Stefan stepped forward. Victoria followed half a step behind, aligned, unified. The judge entered. Everyone rose. The formalities began. Names confirmed, representation noted, settlement acknowledged, and for a moment, it truly looked like this would end the way powerful men prefer endings to look. Clean, quiet, contained. The judge glanced down at the file. Mr. Volkova, this is a petition to formally dissolve the marriage entered into 3 years ago. Are you prepared to proceed? Yes, Your Honor. His voice didn't shake. It didn't hesitate. It carried. Victoria's lips curved faintly, relief already forming. Mr. Halpern opened a folder. Paper slid across polished wood. The judge lifted his pen. And that was when the courtroom doors opened behind them. Softly, almost respectfully, but loud enough. The doors had opened, but not wide enough yet for anyone to see who entered. Just a shift in air, a soft change in pressure. The judge didn't look up immediately. He continued reviewing the file, flipping one page carefully over another. Property division has been agreed upon. Business holdings remain separate. No contest regarding assets acquired prior to marriage. His tone was procedural, detached. Mr. Halpern cleared his throat. That is correct, Your Honor. Both parties have signed preliminary agreements. Stefan stood straight, hands loosely clasped in front of him. This was supposed to be simple. A contract, a signature, an erasure. Victoria leaned slightly toward him again. Almost done, she whispered. He gave the smallest nod. Almost done. The judge adjusted his glasses. There are no minor children listed in this petition. Is that correct? A flicker, so brief, it might have been imagined. Stefan's fingers tightened, then relaxed. That is correct, Mr. Halpern answered before Stefan could speak. Yes, Stefan added, voice steady. Correct. Somewhere behind him, a shoe shifted against the marble floor. A breath. Slow, measured, not rushed. Stefan's spine stiffened, just slightly. The judge dipped his pen in ink, preparing to initial the final page. This court will grant. A sound interrupted him. Not loud, not dramatic. Just the soft rhythm of careful footsteps moving down the aisle. Heel, pause, heel, pause. The kind of walking someone does when they're carrying something fragile. Victoria glanced over her shoulder first. Her expression changed, not into fear, into confusion. Stefan, she murmured quietly. He didn't turn yet. He told himself not to. Whatever this was, it wasn't relevant. Not today, not here. But the footsteps continued. Closer now, measured, controlled. He inhaled once, deeper than necessary. And slowly, almost unwillingly, he turned. Beatrice didn't rush. She didn't announce herself. She simply walked forward as though she had every legal right to stand there. Because she did. Her coat was light cream, simple, unbranded. Her hair pulled back neatly, not styled for spectacle. No makeup designed to impress, just tired eyes, clear eyes. And in her arms, a newborn. The baby was small, maybe a few weeks old, wrapped in soft white cotton, a pale pink cap resting gently over her tiny head. Beatrice held her with instinctive protectiveness, one arm cradling the body, the other steadying the head. The courtroom air thinned. Victoria's hand slipped from Stefan's arm completely. Who is that? She asked under her breath. Stefan didn't answer, because he knew, not consciously, not logically, but something in his chest tightened before his mind caught up. Beatrice stopped 3 steps behind him. Close enough, far enough. Her breathing was steady, but deliberate. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. As if she had rehearsed this moment alone in the dark, over and over. The baby shifted slightly, making a soft, almost questioning sound. A few people in the back row leaned forward. A reporter near the aisle subtly lifted her phone before a court officer shot her a warning glance. The judge finally looked up. His eyes moved from Stefan to Victoria, then to the woman standing quietly with an infant. Yes, he said, polite, confused. Beatrice swallowed. Her voice, when it came, was not loud, but it carried. "Your Honor," she said, pausing briefly to steady herself, "I believe this hearing is missing something." Stefan turned fully now, and when his eyes landed on the child, his breath faltered. No, not here, not today." Beatrice met his gaze. No accusation, no tears, just truth waiting. The baby stirred again, tiny fingers curling against the blanket. The judge straightened slightly. "Ma'am, identify yourself for the record." Beatrice shifted the infant gently, adjusting the blanket around her daughter. "My name is Beatrice Hale." She paused, correcting herself quietly. "Beatrice Volkova." The name landed in the room like a dropped glass. Victoria's face drained. Stefan's pulse pounded visibly in his neck. The baby inhaled sharply. And then she cried. The cry wasn't loud. It wasn't theatrical. It was thin at first, uncertain, like the baby herself didn't fully understand the weight of the room she had just interrupted. But it cut through everything, through polished procedure, through legal confidence, through carefully arranged futures. Stefan felt it before he processed it. That sound, it hit somewhere under his ribs. The baby's tiny face scrunched, mouth opening wider now. Her cry strengthened, not angry, just alive, raw, unfiltered. Victoria stepped back instinctively. "Stefan," she breathed, and this time her voice carried fear. He couldn't answer her. His eyes were locked on the child, locked on the curve of her cheek, locked on the faint crease near her left eyebrow. His stomach dropped. No, that wasn't possible. Beatrice swayed slightly, adjusting the baby against her chest, whispering softly, "It's okay. It's okay, sweetheart. I've got you." The baby hiccuped mid-cry, and then opened her eyes. Dark, focused, unmistakable. Stefan stopped breathing. He didn't mean to. It just happened. A courtroom officer shifted near the wall. Someone coughed awkwardly in the back row. The judge set his pen down slowly. "Mr. Volkova," the judge said carefully, eyes narrowing just slightly, "you indicated there were no minor children connected to this marriage." Silence. Thick. Heavy. Stefan tried to speak. His voice cracked. He cleared his throat. "I wasn't aware of." Beatrice looked at him then. Not angry, not hysterical, just steady. "You weren't aware," she repeated softly. A pause. Not long, but long enough for the truth to hang between them. Victoria turned fully toward him now. "What is she talking about?" His jaw tightened. "I don't know," he said. Too quickly. The baby cried again. Louder. And this time, the sound seemed to echo against the high ceiling. The judge leaned forward slightly. "Mum," he said, his tone now firmer, "whose child is that?" Everything stopped. Even the baby quieted for a second, as if the entire room was holding its breath. Beatrice inhaled slowly. You could see the effort it took not to rush her words. She stepped forward one pace. Her arms didn't tremble now. Her voice did not rise. "She's his." No shouting, no drama, just fact. Victoria's hand slipped from Stefan's arm completely, falling to her side as if it had lost its anchor. Stefan shook his head once. "That's not—" He stopped, because even he didn't finish that sentence, because he couldn't. The baby made a small sound, softer now, almost like a sigh, and in that quiet, something shifted. This wasn't about money anymore. It wasn't about reputation. It wasn't about a clean legal exit. It was about accountability, about a heartbeat that couldn't be negotiated away. Let me ask you something. When truth walks into a room you thought you controlled, do you face it, or do you deny it until it consumes you? If you believe responsibility matters, especially when children are involved, take a second right now and like this video. Not for drama, but for dignity. For every parent who refused to stay silent. Drop a comment below. Should Beatrice have come here publicly? or handled this privately? Because what happens next will change more than a last name. The judge's eyes moved between them once more. His voice was slower now, measured. Mr. Volkova, this court requires clarity. Stefan's composure, the billionaire calm, the polished certainty, cracked in visible fractures. He swallowed, and for the first time in a room he could not control. He looked afraid, long before courtrooms, before headlines, before Victoria Hale ever stood beside him. There was a summer in Brooklyn, not the glossy version people post online, the real one, the one with uneven sidewalks and corner bodegas that still sold coffee for $1. Back then, Stefan Volkova wasn't a billionaire. He was just a man with restless eyes and too many ideas in his head. He rented a small basement apartment near Brooklyn, 2 blocks from a laundromat that rattled late into the night. His laptop sat on a folding table. Cables tangled like unfinished thoughts. Half-written code filled his screen more often than completed projects. He used to tell himself it was temporary. Just for now, he'd mutter, rubbing his eyes. Just until it works. Work. That word meant everything to him. But on Wednesday evenings, he stepped away from the screen. He walked 6 blocks to a small art community center, tucked between a church and a closed hardware store. That's where he saw her. The building was modest, chipped paint near the entrance, colorful murals drawn by neighborhood kids across the side wall. Inside, the smell of acrylic paint mixed with old wooden floors. Children sat at small tables, fingers stained bright blue and yellow. And at the center of it all, Beatrice. She wasn't glamorous. She wasn't trying to be. Her hair was pulled back loosely, sleeves rolled to her elbows, kneeling beside a little girl struggling to paint a sunflower. Try holding the brush like this, she said gently, guiding tiny fingers. See? Don't rush it. Let it breathe. She smiled when the girl got it right. Not a wide smile. A soft one. Earned. Stefan stood near the doorway longer than necessary. He told himself he was just waiting for a friend. But he wasn't. He was watching her, not because she was loud, but because she wasn't. She moved through the room like someone who knew exactly where she belonged. And something about that unsettled him. He had never felt certain about belonging anywhere. It was almost closing time when he finally spoke to her. The kids had left in clusters, parents calling them home. The room felt quieter now, paint cups being stacked, brushes rinsed under a small sink. Beatrice stood near the window, wiping her hands on a towel. "That's a beautiful sunflower," Stefan said, nodding toward the drying artwork pinned to a board. She glanced up, slightly surprised. "Oh, thank you," she replied. A small pause. "It's not mine. She's 7. She thinks sunflowers look happier when they lean toward each other." Stefan blinked. "That's surprisingly philosophical." She shrugged lightly. "Kids see things adults stop noticing." There was no flirtation in her voice, just truth. He stepped closer. "I'm Stefan." She hesitated, just a fraction, before answering. "Beatrice." Their handshake was brief, warm. Neither of them pulled away too quickly. "You volunteer here?" he asked. She nodded. "Twice a week. I work at a hospital during the day." A small breath. "This keeps me balanced." Balanced? Well, she glanced around the room. Medicine can be heavy. "This reminds me why people are worth helping." He studied her then, not the way men sometimes look at women, but the way someone studies a concept they don't fully understand yet. "You sound like you already figured out what matters," he said quietly. Her eyes held his. "No," she replied, almost amused. "I just know what doesn't." That answer stayed with him longer than it should have. They locked up together that night. He insisted on carrying the paint supplies to the storage closet. She insisted on double-checking the windows. Outside, the air was warm. The city hummed in the distance. They stood awkwardly on the sidewalk for a second. "So," he said, shifting slightly, "do you always talk like that?" She tilted her head. "Like what?" "Like you're Certain. A faint smile touched her lips. I'm not certain, she said softly. I just try not to waste words. That intrigued him, because Stefan loved words, loved persuading with them, loved building futures with them. And here was someone who used them carefully, measured. He found himself wanting to hear more. Well, he cleared his throat lightly. There's a coffee place around the corner. If you're not in a hurry. She studied him, not impressed, not dazzled, just considering. I have 30 minutes, she said finally. And something about the way she said it, like she was offering time, not herself, made him respect her immediately. They walked side by side, not touching, not performing, just talking. About medicine, about tech, about growing up feeling like you had to prove yourself. He told her about wanting to build something that would change how people connected. She listened, really listened. Just promise me something, she said quietly at one point. He looked at her. What? If you ever build something powerful. She paused, searching for the right words. Don't let it build you instead. He laughed lightly at that. Trust me, he said, confident, almost dismissive. I control what I create. She didn't argue. She just held his gaze a second longer than necessary. And somewhere inside that quiet moment, a seed was planted, not of wealth, not of fame, but of something softer, more dangerous. Connection. 30 minutes at that coffee shop turned into 2 hours. Neither of them noticed. The place was small, chalkboard menu, mismatched chairs, a barista humming softly while closing down for the night. Beatrice wrapped both hands around her cup, as if warming more than just her fingers. Stefan talked at first, about code, about building platforms that could connect the world, about scalability, about venture capital meetings that hadn't gone well. I just need one breakthrough, he said, leaning forward slightly. One investor who sees what I see. And what do you see? She asked. He didn't hesitate. Impact. She studied him carefully. Impact, she repeated, not mocking him, just tasting the word. And what does that look like? He paused. For the first time that night, he didn't have a rehearsed answer. Well, it looks like not being small anymore. That slipped out before he could filter it. She didn't laugh. She didn't correct him. She just noticed. Being small isn't always bad, she said quietly. Small can mean close. It can mean steady. He looked at her then. Really looked. She wasn't impressed by ambition. She wasn't intimidated by it either. She simply weighed it. Over the next few weeks, he found reasons to stop by the community center more often. At first, he claimed he was researching creative engagement tools. She raised an eyebrow at that. She'd say lightly. Is that what we're calling it? But she let him stay. He began helping the kids clean brushes. Once, he let a little boy paint his hand bright green and stamp it against a canvas. Beatrice laughed, a full, unguarded laugh, and something about the sound settled deep in his chest. They started walking together after class, talking about childhood memories. She told him about long hospital shifts and the way some patients held onto her hand just to feel less alone. He listened, actually listened. Sometimes he'd grow quiet mid-walk, staring at the sidewalk. You disappear sometimes, she observed gently one evening. He blinked. What? You go somewhere else in your head. He exhaled slowly. I'm always calculating. Calculating what? Next steps. Growth. Risk. She nodded once. And where do I fit into that calculation? He stopped walking. The question wasn't dramatic. It was soft, but it carried weight. He searched her face for accusation. There wasn't any, just curiosity. You don't, he said finally. She tilted her head. You're not a variable, he added. You're separate. That answer should have comforted her, but instead, she felt something she couldn't quite name. A small warning, faint, unformed. Still, when he reached for her hand that night, she didn't pull away. It was late summer when he first kissed her. Not rushed, not impulsive, They were on the rooftop of her small apartment building, city lights stretching around them like scattered stars. The air carried the faint scent of street food drifting up from below. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You're different," he murmured. She gave a soft breath of amusement. "From what?" "From everyone." "That's a vague compliment." He smiled. "You don't chase anything." "I don't like running," she replied. He kissed her then. Slow, deliberate. And afterward, they stayed wrapped in each other's arms longer than necessary. In the weeks that followed, his presence in her life deepened. He met her sister Gloria, helped carry groceries up narrow stairs, sat beside her at church one Sunday, awkward but respectful. When she worked late hospital shifts, he brought takeout and waited quietly on her couch. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't extravagant. He was attentive. One night, lying beside her in the dim light of her bedroom, he traced invisible patterns against her arm. "I'm going to build something huge," he whispered. She didn't open her eyes. "I know. And when I do," he continued, voice low, certain, "I won't forget this. I won't forget you." Her eyes opened slowly. "People forget when they grow," she said gently. "Not me." A pause. "Why are you so sure?" He turned toward her fully. Because back then, his confidence felt pure, untouched by ego. "I've never felt at home anywhere," he admitted quietly. "Not in school, not in business rooms, not even in my own head sometimes." He swallowed. "But with you, I don't feel like I have to prove anything." Her expression softened. He pressed his forehead to hers. "You are my family," he said. Not casually, not carelessly, with conviction. And for a moment, she believed him completely. At first, the changes were small. So small Beatrice almost convinced herself they weren't changes at all. Stefan started bringing his laptop to her apartment more often. Not to ignore her. He would sit beside her on the couch, one arm around her waist, the other typing rapidly. Lines of code reflecting faintly in his glasses. "Almost there," he'd murmur. She'd rest her head on his shoulder. "You always say that." He smiled faintly. "Because the first always am," but almost began stretching longer. He missed one Wednesday at the community center. Then two. "Investor call," he explained. "Time zones." She nodded. Of course, she nodded. She believed in supporting the people she loved. But she started noticing something else. When he talked about the future now, his eyes lit differently. Brighter, sharper, faster. He began mentioning Silicon Valley, Chicago, London. He talked about scale, about expansion, about acceleration. One night, sitting at her small kitchen table, he spread printed pitch decks across the surface. "If this works," he said, tapping the paper, "everything changes." She studied his face. "And if it doesn't?" He hesitated. "Just slightly. It has to." That answer unsettled her more than she expected, because she knew something about certainty. It can turn rigid. One evening, after she finished a 12-hour hospital shift, she found him pacing her living room. Phone pressed to his ear. "No," he said sharply. "That valuation is too low. We're not desperate." He turned when he saw her. His expression softened instantly. "I'll call you back," he said into the phone, then hung up. She set her bag down slowly. "You're different," she said quietly. He frowned. "Different how?" She struggled for the right words. "Faster," she replied. He laughed lightly. "That's good, isn't it?" She exhaled. "Speed isn't always strength." He walked toward her, cupping her face gently. "You're overthinking." Maybe exhaustion blurred her perception. But when he held her that night, something felt slightly distant, not cold, not uncaring, just preoccupied. He began checking emails mid-conversation, glancing at his phone when it buzzed, saying 1 second more often than before. Small things, but small things accumulate. One Saturday afternoon, they sat on the rooftop again. The same skyline, the same warm breeze, but he wasn't looking at her this time. He was looking beyond. "I can see it," he said softly. See what? The company, offices everywhere, conferences, recognition. She waited. And us? She asked. He turned toward her, smiled. Of course us. But the pause before us did not go unnoticed. She reached for his hand anyway. Just don't lose yourself, she whispered. I won't, he replied quickly. Too quickly. A few weeks later, he received an email that changed his posture entirely. Major investor interest. Real funding. Real opportunity. He showed her the message with trembling excitement. This is it, he breathed. She smiled. Genuinely. She wanted him to win. She wanted him fulfilled. But somewhere beneath the joy, there was a quiet awareness. Success demands things. Time. Energy. Priority. And she wondered, not aloud, not yet, where she would fall in that hierarchy. That night, as they lay in bed, he stared at the ceiling. Everything's about to move fast, he murmured. She turned toward him. Fast where? He didn't answer immediately, just exhaled slowly. Up. She watched his profile in the dim light. Up. Not forward. Not together. Up. And though he held her close before drifting to sleep, his dreams were already running ahead of them. Success didn't make Stefan calmer. It made him electric. His phone buzzed constantly now. Investor follow-ups, meeting confirmations, expansion discussions. He answered emails while brushing his teeth, took calls while tying his shoes. Beatrice noticed the shift before he admitted it. He started waking up before dawn, not gently, abruptly, like his mind refused to stay still. One morning, she opened her eyes and found him sitting at the edge of the bed, staring at nothing. You okay? She asked softly, voice still thick with sleep. He didn't answer right away. Yeah, he said eventually. Just thinking about. He rubbed his hands together slowly. Everything. That word again. Everything. He began pacing more often. In her apartment, on the rooftop, even outside the community center when he showed up, which was rare now. She tried not to complain, tried to be understanding. But the warmth between them felt thinner. One evening, she found him standing by the window, staring out at the Brooklyn street below. Cars passing, neighbors laughing faintly in the distance. You look like you're already somewhere else, she said gently. He didn't deny it. I might have to travel, he replied. Travel where? He hesitated. Back home. Just temporarily. Her chest tightened. Home. He hadn't used that word in months. You mean overseas? He nodded slowly. There are tech conferences, investor dinners. My father's been asking me to visit. She crossed her arms lightly, not defensive, just grounding herself. For how long? He exhaled. I don't know yet. The uncertainty hung between them. She walked toward him carefully. Is this about business or about something else? He looked at her then, really looked. And for the first time in months, she saw something under the ambition. Fear. I don't know who I'm becoming, he admitted quietly. That honesty startled her. You're becoming successful, she said. And what if that version of me doesn't fit here anymore? The question wasn't cruel. It was vulnerable. And that somehow hurt more. She reached for his hand. You don't outgrow people just because you grow, she whispered. He squeezed her fingers once. But his mind was already calculating distances. It happened 3 weeks later. No dramatic build-up, no shouting. Just an evening that felt slightly heavier than the rest. Rain tapped softly against the windows of her apartment. She had cooked dinner, something simple. He barely touched his plate. You've been quiet, she said. He nodded. I booked a flight. The words landed flat. Her fork paused mid-air. When? Friday. Friday. Her voice cracked slightly. That's in 4 days. I know. Silence. She set her fork down slowly. How long? A few weeks. Maybe longer. It depends. On what? On how things move. Move. Always forward. Always upward. never still. She tried to steady her breathing. "Stefan, are you coming back?" The question trembled at the edges. He didn't answer immediately, and that pause was louder than anything he could have said. "Of course," he replied finally, but it wasn't automatic anymore. She saw it. He saw that she saw it. He ran a hand through his hair. "I need to make sure I'm building this the right way. My father thinks I'm rushing. Investors think I'm cautious. I can't afford to misstep. And we are—" "What? A misstep?" "No," he said quickly. "You're not." She waited. "Then what are we?" He looked exhausted suddenly, like ambition had weight he hadn't anticipated. "I don't know how to be both," he confessed quietly. "Both? What?" "Driven and settled." The word settled sounded foreign in his mouth. She swallowed. "You think loving someone settles you?" "No," he shook his head. "It anchors you, and that's bad. It slows you down." There it was. Not cruel, not loud, but honest. Her eyes shimmered slightly, though she refused to let tears fall. She exhaled shakily. "I thought we were building something together." "We are," he insisted. "But you keep talking like you're running alone." He stood up, restless again, pacing. "I just need space to think." "You've had space," she whispered. He stopped moving. For a moment, they just stood there, rain tapping against the glass. "I'll call," he said finally. She nodded slowly. "You always say that." He walked toward her then, held her face gently in his hands. "I love you," he murmured. She searched his eyes. "Do you?" A flicker of hurt crossed his expression. "Yes," but the certainty that once lived behind that word was thinner now. Friday came faster than either of them were ready for. At the airport in John F. Kennedy International Airport, he hugged her tightly. She held on to him longer than usual. "Don't disappear," she whispered against his coat. "I won't," he replied. He pulled away first. That detail stayed with her later, long after the plane had taken off. The apartment felt different that night. Quieter, not silent. Brooklyn never truly goes silent, but hollow. Beatrice placed his extra mug back in the cabinet slowly, folded the blanket he used on the couch, smoothed the pillow on her bed where he had slept. She told herself it was temporary. Just travel, just business. He had ambition. That wasn't a crime. She moved through the next few days carefully, holding onto routine like a railing. Hospital shifts. Community center on Wednesdays. Church on Sunday. He called the first night. Video chat. Grainy signal. "I landed," he said. "It's colder here." She smiled. "Eat something." He laughed lightly. "You sound like my mother." And I like it." The second call was shorter. Investor dinner, networking, background noise. The third call came 2 days later, then 4, then a week. She told herself time zones were difficult. She told herself growth required sacrifice. She told herself love didn't need constant reassurance. But something in her body felt off. She woke up nauseated one morning, assumed it was exhaustion, hospital cafeteria food, stress. She brushed it off. Then came the fatigue, the kind that settled deep in her bones. She sat on her couch one evening, staring at nothing, hand resting absently on her stomach. She murmured to herself. "You're just tired." Her cycle was late. But stress can do that, she reasoned. She didn't panic. Not yet. She waited. Another week passed. The calls from Stefan became texts. Short, efficient, busy today, big meeting. Will explain soon. She typed long replies. He sent short ones. One afternoon, standing in the pharmacy aisle, she stared at a small rectangular box in her hand. Just to rule it out, she thought. Just to quiet the noise in her head. Back home, she placed the test on the bathroom counter, sat on the edge of the tub, waited. The seconds stretched strangely. Too long, too loud. When she looked down, 2 lines. Clear, unmistakable. Her breath left her body in a slow, uneven release. "No," she whispered. Not denial. Shock. She sat there longer than necessary, staring, blinking, as if the lines might rearrange themselves if she gave them enough time. They didn't. Her hand moved slowly to her stomach. There was nothing there yet. No curve, no movement. Just potential, life. Stefan's child. A sound escaped her throat. Half laugh, half sob. Well, she exhaled shakily. That's not small. She reached for her phone, paused, lowered it. She wanted to tell him in person. She wanted to see his face when he heard it. So she waited. She called him that night. No answer. Sent a message. Can we talk? Hours passed. No reply. The next morning, a text came through. Back-to-back meetings. What's up? Her thumbs hovered over the screen. I'm pregnant. The words felt too large for a text bubble. Call me when you can, she typed instead. He didn't call that day, or the next. A week later, a postcard arrived. Bright skyline photo. Short handwriting. Things are moving fast here. Hope you're good. Miss you. She stared at the word miss. It felt generic, detached. She placed the postcard on her kitchen table. Her stomach churned more often now. Morning sickness, fatigue, reality. She called again. Voicemail. Her voice trembled slightly. Hey. It's me. Call me back when you can. Another week. Another postcard. Another short message. No calls. Then, nothing. No postcards. No texts. No responses. Silence expanded quietly. Not dramatic. Not explosive. Just absence. She stopped calling after the 6th unanswered attempt. Pride? No. Protection. She stood in her small bathroom one evening, staring at herself in the mirror. Her face looked the same, but she felt different, alone in a way she had never felt before. Her hand rested over her stomach again. You're here, she whispered softly. A tear slipped down before she could stop it. She inhaled sharply, tried to steady herself. It's okay, she murmured, though her voice trembled. We'll figure it out. Her knees buckled slightly and she lowered herself to the floor beside the bathtub, not collapsing, just folding inward. The sobs came quietly. Not loud, not hysterical, just small, controlled breaks in her breathing. She pressed her palm against her mouth to muffle the sound. Because the apartment walls were thin, because she didn't want neighbors to hear, because she didn't want this to feel public. I believed you, she whispered between breaths. Her shoulders shook once, twice. Then she forced herself to breathe slowly. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. You are my family, she repeated faintly, echoing his old words. The memory hurt differently now. She stayed on that bathroom floor for a long time, until the crying softened into exhaustion, until resolve replaced shock. When she finally stood up, she wiped her face with both hands, looked at herself again. You're not alone, she told the reflection. Not really. She picked up her phone one last time, opened their message thread, scrolled up to old photos, old laughter, old promises. Her thumb hovered over his name. Then she set the phone down. If he wanted to know, he would ask. He didn't. And that silence became answer enough. Morning sickness doesn't pause for responsibility. Neither do hospital shifts. Beatrice stood under the bright ceiling lights of New York Presbyterian Hospital, tying her scrub strings tighter, as if discipline could steady nausea. Her reflection in the locker room mirror looked composed, almost calm, but her stomach rolled again. Breathe, she murmured quietly to herself. Just breathe. She pressed her palm lightly below her ribs, not enough to draw attention, just enough to ground herself. She hadn't told anyone yet. Not Gloria, not Brielle, certainly not Stefan. At work, she moved with practiced efficiency, checked vitals, adjusted 4 lines, held elderly hands during difficult conversations. She poured comfort into strangers while carrying a secret inside her own body. Beatrice, you okay? A colleague asked one afternoon after she leaned slightly against a counter. Yeah, she replied quickly. Just tired. Tired was easy. Tired didn't require explanation, but exhaustion felt different now. Heavier, personal. One evening, after a 12-hour shift, she sat alone in the staff break room, half-eaten sandwich in front of her, phone face down. She didn't check it anymore. She didn't expect anything. Her hand drifted to her stomach again. You and me, she whispered softly. A nurse across the room laughed at something on her phone. Life continued. Bills continued. Rent continued. Pregnancy appointments would need to be scheduled. Insurance paperwork filed. There was no dramatic moment of empowerment, no sudden swelling music in her chest. Just a decision. Quiet. Firm. She would not chase someone who chose distance. She would not beg for presents. She would build instead. She requested extra shifts, overnight rotations, picked up coverage for co-workers with family obligations. If she was going to carry this child alone, she would not do it halfway. One night, near the end of her shift, she helped deliver a baby in the maternity wing. The newborn cried instantly. Strong lungs, strong voice. The mother sobbed with relief. Beatrice stood back afterward, removing her gloves slowly. Her throat tightened. She imagined her own delivery room, imagined standing there without him. A flicker of fear passed through her. She exhaled shakily. Then she straightened her shoulders. I'll be enough, she whispered under her breath. And she meant it. She told Gloria first, not with a grand announcement, just over tea at her apartment kitchen table. Her sister listened quietly. No interruption, no dramatic gasp, just steady eye contact. You're sure? Gloria asked softly. Beatrice nodded once. Yeah. A pause. Does he know? She shook her head. He stopped answering. Gloria inhaled slowly through her nose. Not anger. Contained fury. Well, she said carefully, choosing her words, then we handle this without him. That we mattered. It wasn't pity. It was alliance. Brielle found out 2 days later. Her reaction was louder. He what? She demanded, pacing the living room. He just vanished. Beatrice sat on the couch, hands folded over her stomach protectively. It's not that simple. It feels simple to me. Gloria gave Brielle a look that meant lower your volume. Brielle softened slightly. She knelt in front of Beatrice. Okay, she said gently. Are you scared? Beatrice hesitated. Yeah. The honesty slipped out before she could filter it. Of what? Brielle asked. Of doing this wrong, of not being enough, of... She paused, blinking rapidly. Of her asking one day why he left. The room went quiet. Gloria reached across the table, squeezing her hand. You're not wrong for loving someone, she said softly. And you're not weak for choosing to keep this baby. Brielle nodded firmly. We're here. Doctor appointments, baby shopping, midnight cravings, all of it. Beatrice let out a shaky laugh. Midnight cravings? Oh, I'm prepared, Brielle replied, trying to lighten the air. Pickles at 2 a.m.? Done. The tension eased slightly, but when Gloria stood to hug her, Beatrice's composure cracked. Just a little. Her face pressed into her sister's shoulder, her breathing uneven. She tried to steady it. I thought he'd come back. Gloria stroked her hair gently. Maybe he will, she said carefully. But whether he does or not, you're not alone. And for the first time since the bathroom floor, Beatrice allowed herself to lean into that truth. Not dependence, support, different, important. When they left that night, her apartment didn't feel hollow anymore. It felt transitional. She stood by the window afterward, one hand resting over the quiet life growing inside her. You're already loved, she whispered. And this time, the words didn't hurt. Sunday mornings became her anchor. Not because she was trying to escape reality, but because she needed stillness somewhere. The small brick church on the corner of her block in Brooklyn had never felt more necessary. The wooden pews creaked softly as people shifted. Sunlight filtered through stained glass in muted colors. Beatrice sat near the middle aisle, hands folded loosely over the gentle curve beginning to form beneath her coat. She hadn't announced her pregnancy publicly, but the older women in the congregation noticed everything. Mrs. Caldwell squeezed her hand during the greeting portion of the service. "You look tired, sweetheart," she whispered. Beatrice smiled politely. "Just working a lot." She was working a lot. But that wasn't the whole truth. During prayer, she bowed her head lower than usual, not asking for miracles, not asking for Stefan to return, just asking for steadiness. "Give me strength," she whispered under her breath. "That's enough." The choir began singing softly. The melody filled the space gently, not overwhelming, just present. She closed her eyes. For a few moments, she allowed herself to stop planning. Stop calculating. Stop anticipating abandonment. Just breathe. After service, Pastor Reynolds approached her quietly. "You've been carrying something heavy," he said kindly. She almost laughed at the accuracy of that sentence. "Well," she replied softly, "I suppose I have." He didn't press. He didn't demand details. He simply placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Whatever it is, you don't have to carry it alone." That sentence settled somewhere deep, not because it erased her reality, but because it reminded her that community was not conditional. Later, walking home, she felt the first subtle flutter inside her. Not a full kick, just a faint movement. She stopped mid-step, hand pressing gently to her stomach. "Was that you?" she whispered. Her breath caught. Tears welled, not from sadness this time, from awe. "You're real," she murmured softly. In that moment, fear and wonder coexisted, and instead of breaking her, it grounded her. The day she gave birth was not dramatic. No chaotic rush, no cinematic panic, just controlled urgency and Gloria gripping her hand in the delivery room. "Breathe," Gloria coached softly. "You've got this." Beatrice nodded through clenched teeth. "I know," she whispered, though pain fractured the edges of her voice. Hours later, a cry filled the room, strong, alive, and when the nurse placed the baby against her chest, Beatrice froze, not from fear, from recognition. The tiny face, the shape of the eyes, the faint crease near the left eyebrow. Her heart stuttered. "Hi," she whispered shakily. "Hi, baby." She named her quietly, a name she chose alone, not to exclude him, but because she could not wait for someone who wasn't there. The first nights were brutal. Sleep came in fragments. Feeding schedules blurred into early morning exhaustion. Sometimes she sat in the rocking chair at 3 a.m., baby pressed against her shoulder, whispering lullabies she barely remembered from childhood. "You're okay," she murmured softly. "Mama's here." Her voice would crack slightly on that word. Mama. It felt heavy, earned. One evening, while trying to assemble a crib alone, frustration finally cracked her composure. The screws wouldn't align. The baby monitor beeped faintly. Her back ached. She sat down on the floor abruptly. Tears spilled before she could stop them. "Why couldn't you just stay?" she whispered into the empty apartment. The baby stirred in the bassinet. Beatrice inhaled sharply, wiped her face, stood up, adjusted the crib again. She refused to let bitterness become her identity. Months passed. She returned to work part-time. Gloria watched the baby during shifts. Brielle brought meals. Church members dropped off diapers and gently used clothes. The apartment filled with soft baby sounds, coos, tiny hiccups, first laughter, and every milestone strengthened something inside Beatrice. Not hardness, not resentment, capability. One afternoon, while holding her daughter up in front of the mirror, she whispered, "It's you and me." The baby reached out, touching her reflection. Beatrice smiled through misty eyes. "We're going to be okay." And for the first time, she didn't say it to convince herself. She said it because she believed it. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even intentional. It happened on an ordinary Thursday. Beatrice had just finished a shorter hospital shift. Her daughter was asleep in the stroller beside her as she waited in line at a small grocery store in Brooklyn. The cashier was flipping through a magazine during a slow moment. Beatrice wasn't paying attention at first. She was calculating grocery totals in her head. Diapers, formula, milk, bread. Can you believe how young he is? The cashier muttered to another employee. Beatrice didn't look up. He's what? 34? The other woman replied. Already worth billions. Something in her chest tightened. 34. Her eyes lifted slowly. The magazine cover was angled slightly toward her. She saw the headline first. Forbes, Tech Visionaries Under 35. And then she saw his face. Stefan Volkova, clean-shaven, sharper jawline, expensive suit. The kind of controlled smile that signals triumph. Her breath caught quietly. Not loud enough for anyone to notice. Just gone. Her daughter stirred in the stroller, making a soft sound. Beatrice swallowed. She stepped closer to the rack under the pretense of browsing. Her fingers trembled slightly as she lifted the magazine. There were more photos inside. Conference stages, handshake with investors, a feature article detailing rapid expansion overseas. She skimmed quickly. And then, a smaller photograph near the bottom of the page. He stood beside a woman. Elegant, poised, blonde hair swept neatly back. Victoria Hale. The caption read, Volkova announces engagement to philanthropist Victoria Hale. Engagement. The word didn't explode. It didn't scream. It sank. Slow, heavy. Her vision blurred for half a second. She blinked hard. Read it again. Engagement. Her grip tightened on the magazine until the paper crinkled softly. Her daughter whimpered faintly. Beatrice looked down instantly. I'm here, she whispered automatically, but her voice sounded far away to her own ears. She flipped the page again. There he was, arm around Victoria's waist, comfortable, confident, public. No mention of Brooklyn, no mention of history, no mention of a woman who once stood beside him before the investors, before the headlines, no mention of a child. Her pulse pounded, not from jealousy, not from rage, from clarity. Oh, she breathed quietly. So that's what silence meant. The cashier glanced up. You buying that? Beatrice shook her head slowly. No. Her voice was steady now. Too steady. She placed the magazine back on the rack carefully, as if mishandling it might make the situation louder. She pushed the stroller toward the exit. Each step felt slightly heavier. Outside, Brooklyn moved normally. Cars passing, people laughing, a bus roaring by, life unaffected. She stopped halfway down the sidewalk, rested her hand on the stroller handle. Her daughter blinked up at her. Dark eyes, unmistakable eyes, the same eyes that had frozen a billionaire years later in a courtroom. Beatrice inhaled deeply, then exhaled. He wasn't coming back. Not quietly, not privately, not at all. The reality didn't shatter her. It solidified her. Well, she murmured softly, more to herself than anyone else, that answers that. A tear escaped despite her composure. She wiped it away quickly. Not in anger. In finality, she bent slightly, brushing a finger against her daughter's cheek. You don't need a man who forgets, she whispered gently. You need a father who shows up, and for the first time, a thought formed that had not existed before. Not about revenge, not about exposure, but about acknowledgement. If he could stand on magazine covers and speak about legacy, he would not erase hers. She straightened, adjusted the stroller blanket, and walked home. Not broken, not hysterical, but awakened. The reinvention was no longer survival. It was preparation. Success reshapes a man quietly. Not overnight, not with fireworks, but through interviews, through curated photographs, through headlines written by strangers. Stefan Volkova learned quickly how to speak in polished soundbites. He stood beneath stage lighting at technology summits, microphone clipped neatly against his lapel. Growth is about vision, he said smoothly. It's about building platforms that outlast you. The audience applauded. No one asked about Brooklyn. No one asked about the woman who once sat on a rooftop and warned him not to let success build him instead. He refined his wardrobe, tailored suits, muted colors, luxury watches. His social media presence became intentional, professional, strategic. Images of office expansions, international travel, handshake photos with investors in London, Berlin, Singapore. He no longer looked restless. He looked controlled. But sometimes, late at night in his high-rise Manhattan apartment, he stood by the window staring down at the city lights. His phone lit up constantly, emails, invitations, press requests. Yet occasionally, his thumb hovered over an old message thread he hadn't opened in months. Beatrice. He never typed, never called. He told himself she had moved on. He told himself if something serious had happened, she would have found a way to tell him. He told himself silence meant peace. He murmured once to the empty room, rubbing his temple. It was complicated. Complicated was easier than accountable. His PR manager once asked, "Do you have any personal narratives we should avoid in interviews? Past controversies, relationships?" He shook his head. No. Clean slate. That's how the world would know him. Not as a man who left uncertainty behind, but as a self-made visionary. He began using phrases like "my journey" and "my transformation." He spoke about resilience, about reinvention, about courage, and with every public appearance, the version of him that once existed in Brooklyn felt more distant, not erased. Just compartmentalized. He convinced himself that compartmentalizing wasn't lying. It was focus. Victoria Hale fit seamlessly into the new narrative. She came from old Manhattan wealth, board memberships, charity galas, art foundation fundraisers. Where Stefan built from scratch, Victoria inherited legacy. Together, they looked balanced, calculated, photogenic. Their first public appearance as a couple was at a charity benefit downtown. Photographers called their names. "Stefan, Victoria, this way." Victoria smiled with practiced grace. Stefan placed his hand at the small of her back. Comfortable, natural. He learned quickly how to lean slightly toward her during interviews, how to let her finish certain sentences, how to describe their relationship as unexpected but grounding. The word felt almost ironic. Magazine features followed. Lifestyle blogs wrote about tech meets tradition. An engagement ring appeared months later in a carefully staged photograph. Victoria's caption read, "Grateful for love, partnership, and the future." Stefan reposted it with a simple, "She said yes." No hesitation, no visible doubt. In interviews, when asked about starting a family, he smiled. "We'll see what the future holds." Future, not past, never past. No journalist ever uncovered the Brooklyn marriage record. No one connected the dots. Because Stefan had moved quickly, quietly, efficiently. He had changed business addresses, updated legal documentation, shifted his primary residence overseas during key filing periods. Technically, he hadn't lied. He had simply omitted. One evening, sitting across from Victoria in their Manhattan apartment, she studied him closely. "You're still somewhere else sometimes," she said softly. He blinked. "What do you mean?" "Your eyes. They drift." He forced a smile. "Just thinking about expansion." She nodded slowly. "I don't want ghosts in our future, Stefan." The word ghost unsettled him. "There are none," he replied firmly, and maybe he believed it. Or maybe belief is something we construct when truth feels inconvenient. Victoria reached across the table, placing her hand over his. "I need honesty," she said. "You have it," he answered. His voice didn't shake, but something inside him did, because deep down, beneath the polished interviews and curated headlines, he knew silence is not the same as absence, and omission is not the same as innocence. It didn't happen in a dramatic boardroom. No shouting, no crisis, just a private meeting in a glass-walled office overlooking Manhattan. Stefan sat across from his attorney, Mr. Halpern. Technically, Halpern said, adjusting a stack of documents, your marriage in Brooklyn was never formally dissolved. Stefan's jaw tightened slightly. I thought we handled that. You relocated overseas during the separation. That complicates jurisdiction. But it's manageable. Manageable. That word again. What are the risks? Stefan asked quietly. Halpern folded his hands. If she contests, it becomes public record. Media might dig, and if she doesn't, then it's procedural, efficient, quiet. Silence stretched. Stefan stared out at the skyline. He pictured Brooklyn for a split second, the rooftop, her laughter. Then he shut the memory down. She hasn't contacted me, he said flatly. No claims, no demands. Halpern nodded. Then it's likely she won't. Likely. Stefan inhaled slowly. And there are no children listed on the marriage certificate. Halpern glanced down. No children recorded. Stefan's chest felt tight for a brief, inconvenient second. No children recorded. He didn't ask if that meant none existed. He didn't ask if she had tried to reach him. He didn't ask because asking would create responsibility. Proceed, he said. Halpern slid the documents forward. We'll file through the Manhattan court. Serve her notice formally. If she doesn't respond within the statutory window, it defaults. Default. As if absence equaled agreement. Stefan signed. The pen moved smoothly across paper. He told himself this was closure. He told himself adults move forward. He told himself if she needed him, she would have insisted. But somewhere beneath the logic, there was discomfort. He ignored it. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. Beatrice was bouncing her daughter gently on her hip when she heard the knock. Not loud, just firm. She opened the door to find a man in a neutral suit holding a clipboard. Beatrice Volkova? Her stomach dropped at the surname. Yes, you've been served. The words didn't register immediately. She accepted the envelope automatically. Closed the door slowly. The apartment felt suddenly too small. Her daughter made a soft sound against her shoulder. Beatrice carried her to the couch, setting her carefully in the bassinet before sitting down herself. Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened the envelope. Legal letterhead. Court filing. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Her name printed cleanly beneath Stefan's. Her breathing grew shallow. She read it once. Then again. Filed in Manhattan. Petitioner. Stefan Volkova. No children listed. Her vision blurred. No children? She whispered. The paper shook faintly in her hands. The audacity of it didn't scream. It stunned. He hadn't asked. Hadn't called. Hadn't confirmed. He had simply declared her erased. Her daughter stirred, making a soft cooing noise. Beatrice looked at her. Dark eyes. Unmistakable eyes. They don't know you exist, she said quietly. Her voice cracked slightly. Not hysterical. Just wounded. She pressed her palm to her mouth to steady her breathing. Inhale. Exhale. The paper crinkled softly as her grip tightened. Well, she murmured, staring at the legal language. That's convenient. Convenient for him. Efficient for him. Silent for him. Her shoulders began to shake. Not violently, but enough. A tear fell onto the page, smudging ink faintly. He had rewritten the narrative without her consent, declared there were no children, no obligations, no legacy beyond what he curated publicly. Her daughter let out a tiny cry. Beatrice wiped her face quickly and lifted her. I see you, she whispered fiercely. I see you. She held the baby close against her chest, her breathing uneven. The apartment clock ticked audibly, time moving forward as if nothing had changed. But everything had. She looked back down at the document. Default judgment if no response. Silence equals agreement. She laughed softly, not amused. Just stunned. If you believe silence doesn't erase responsibility, she whispered slowly, almost as if speaking to the walls themselves, then maybe it's time someone stops being quiet. She wasn't thinking about revenge. She wasn't thinking about humiliation. She was thinking about acknowledgement, about record, about truth. Her daughter's tiny hand gripped the fabric of her shirt. And in that grip, she felt clarity. The courtroom was no longer hypothetical. It was necessary. Gloria read the divorce notice twice before speaking. She didn't react immediately, didn't explode, didn't curse Stefan's name. She folded the paper carefully and placed it on the kitchen table. Her eyes lifted slowly to Beatrice. "Are you sure it says no children?" she asked quietly. Beatrice nodded once. "Yes." A pause. Gloria exhaled through her nose, controlled. "That's deliberate." The baby stirred in Beatrice's arms, making a soft whimper. Beatrice adjusted the blanket instinctively. "I could ignore it," she said softly. "Let it default." Gloria's brows tightened slightly. "And then what?" "It finalizes, quietly, and legally states your daughter doesn't exist," Gloria replied firmly. Silence. Beatrice looked down at the tiny face resting against her chest. Her voice lowered. "I don't want a war." Gloria leaned forward. "This isn't about war. It's about record." Beatrice's jaw trembled faintly. "He's powerful now," she whispered. "Lawyers, media, influence." Gloria reached across the table. "So are you." Beatrice shook her head slightly. "I'm a nurse with a small apartment and a baby." "You're a mother," Gloria corrected gently. "And that outweighs a headline." Beatrice swallowed hard. Gloria's tone softened. "Listen to me carefully," she said. "If you walk into that courtroom, this becomes public. There will be questions, cameras, noise." The word noise lingered. Beatrice felt it in her chest. "I don't want her exposed," she murmured. Gloria nodded slowly. "Then think carefully before you decide." A long silence settled between them. The baby made a small hiccuping sound. Beatrice kissed the top of her head. "Part of me," she admitted quietly, "wants to stay home. Pretend this paper never arrived." "That's not weakness," Gloria replied. "That's protection." Beatrice looked up. "And the other part?" Gloria studied her sister carefully. "The other part wants acknowledgement." Beatrice didn't deny it. Gloria squeezed her hand. "Just promise me something," she said softly. "What?" "Whatever you decide, make sure you're doing it for your daughter, not to hurt him." Beatrice inhaled slowly. "I'm not trying to hurt him." "I know." Another pause. "But pain has a way of spreading," Gloria added carefully. Beatrice nodded. "I'll think about it." And she meant that. Brielle's reaction was different, immediate, sharp. "What do you mean, he filed?" she demanded, pacing the living room. "He filed," Beatrice repeated softly. "And listed no children?" "Yes." Brielle let out a disbelieving laugh. "Oh no, 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 no." She stopped pacing and faced Beatrice directly. "You are not staying quiet." Beatrice shifted slightly on the couch. "It might be easier." "For who?" The question landed. "For everyone," Beatrice replied faintly. Brielle crouched in front of her, eyes intense but not cruel. "Look at me." Beatrice hesitated, then did. "Your daughter deserves her name attached to truth," Brielle said firmly. "Not footnotes." Beatrice's throat tightened. "He didn't know," she whispered. "He didn't ask." Silence. The baby stirred again, blinking up at the ceiling. Brielle softened slightly. "Are you scared?" she asked quietly. "Yes." The word came easily this time. "Of what?" "Of standing in front of him again," Beatrice admitted. "Of seeing how easily he moved on. Of feeling small." Brielle shook her head. "You are not small." Beatrice gave a faint, tired smile. "I don't feel strong." "You don't have to feel strong," Brielle replied. "You just have to show up." The phrase lingered. Show up. Brielle leaned back on her heels. "Do you know what scares powerful men?" she continued softly. Beatrice didn't answer. Accountability, not revenge, not humiliation. Accountability. Brielle reached out and gently touched the baby's hand. "She didn't choose this," she said. "You did. And you chose her." Beatrice's eyes filled slightly. "I don't want drama." "Then don't bring drama," Brielle replied. Bring truth. Another pause. Longer this time. Beatrice stared at the divorce notice on the table. The official language, the assumption of silence. Her breathing steadied gradually. What if I go, she said slowly, and I don't ask for anything? Brielle's brow furrowed. What do you mean? No money. No spectacle. Just acknowledgement. Brielle studied her. That's even stronger. Beatrice looked down at her daughter again, tiny fingers curling instinctively. You deserve to be seen, she whispered softly. And for the first time since the envelope arrived, the idea of stepping into that courtroom didn't feel like aggression. It felt like correction. The court date was printed clearly at the bottom of the notice. Manhattan, 9 a.m. Petitioner present. Respondent optional. Optional. Beatrice stared at that word longer than the rest. Optional suggested she didn't matter. Optional suggested her absence would simplify everything. That night, after putting her daughter down to sleep, she sat alone at the kitchen table. The apartment was quiet. No Gloria, no Brielle, no advice, just her. And the paper. She traced her finger along Stefan's name slowly. The same name she had once said with love, now typed in legal font, efficient, detached. She imagined not going. The divorce finalizing quietly. His marriage to Victoria proceeding without complication. Public celebration. No one questioning timelines. No one questioning omissions. Her daughter growing up one day and asking, "Why didn't you say anything?" That question lingered. Heavy. She closed her eyes briefly. She exhaled. Not from anger, from clarity. If she stayed silent, she would be complicit in her own erasure. If she showed up, she would disrupt his comfort. But disruption wasn't cruelty. It was truth. She stood slowly, walked to the bassinet, watched her daughter sleep, tiny chest rising and falling rhythmically. "You deserve your name recorded," she whispered. The baby stirred faintly. Beatrice brushed a finger across her cheek. "I'm not going to scream," she continued softly. "I'm not going to beg. I'm just going to stand there." She felt something settle in her spine. Not fury, not vengeance. Resolve. The next morning, she called the court clerk. "Yes," she said calmly into the phone. "I will be attending." The words felt steady. Right. When she hung up, her hands trembled slightly. "Okay," she murmured to herself. "Okay." The choice had been made. The morning of the hearing arrived colder than expected. Brooklyn streets were quiet when she stepped outside. She had barely slept. Not from panic, from anticipation. Inside her apartment earlier that morning, she stood in front of her bedroom mirror. Her daughter lay in the crib behind her, awake but calm. Beatrice adjusted her cream coat slowly. Simple, neutral, no statement pieces, no drama. She studied her reflection. She looked older than she had in Brooklyn rooftop summers. Stronger too. There were faint shadows under her eyes, evidence of midnight feedings, evidence of resilience. She leaned closer to the mirror. "You're not there to fight," she whispered to herself. A pause. "You're there to correct." Her voice wavered slightly. She swallowed. "You will not shrink." The baby made a small cooing sound behind her. Beatrice turned and lifted her gently, wrapped her in a soft white blanket, adjusted the tiny cap over her head. The baby blinked up at her. Dark eyes. Unmistakable eyes. Her breath caught briefly. He would see it instantly. There was no disguising that resemblance. Her hands trembled faintly as she secured the car seat. She exhaled slowly, steadying herself. "We're just walking into a building, not into war, not into humiliation, into a record." At the subway platform, she held the stroller firmly. People around her glanced briefly at the infant. No one knew. No one suspected the collision waiting ahead. The ride into Manhattan felt longer than usual. Every station announcement echoed slightly louder in her ears. Her heart beat steadily, but deeply. When she stepped out near the courthouse, the building loomed tall and indifferent. Stone, solid, impersonal. She adjusted the blanket one more time. Her daughter made a soft sound. "I'm here." Beatrice whispered automatically. She climbed the steps slowly. Security check, metal detector, bag scan, routine, ordinary. Her palms were damp. She wiped them discreetly against her coat. The hallway leading to the courtroom felt narrower than expected. Voices murmured inside. Lawyers, observers, paper shuffling. She stopped outside the double doors, her reflection faintly visible in the polished wood. Her breathing slowed deliberately. Inhale, exhale, inhale. She looked down at her daughter one last time. "We're not asking," she whispered softly. "We're stating." Her fingers tightened gently around the handle. For a split second, fear tried to surface. What if he looks through me? What if he denies her? What if... She cut the thoughts short. "No," she murmured. And then, she pushed the doors open. The courtroom doors had just swung open. Beatrice had stepped inside. The baby had cried. And now, there was no pretending. Stefan stood rigid near the front, attorney at his side, Victoria slightly behind him. The judge leaned forward, studying the scene carefully. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "state your purpose for entering these proceedings." Beatrice shifted the newborn gently in her arms. Her voice, when it came, wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. "I'm the respondent," she said, "and the mother of his child." A ripple passed through the room. Stefan's attorney cleared his throat quickly. "Your Honor, this is unexpected. We were not informed of—" "You were informed," Beatrice interrupted softly. She didn't raise her tone, but her eyes didn't waver. "I attempted contact multiple times." Stefan swallowed. He could feel Victoria's gaze burning into the side of his face. "This isn't the place for accusations," Halpern insisted. Beatrice tilted her head slightly. "No," she agreed. "It's the place for record." The word record landed heavily. The judge tapped his pen once against the bench. "Mr. Volkova," he said, "did you disclose any children connected to this marriage in your petition?" Stefan's mouth opened, closed. "I was unaware," he began, but the sentence lacked conviction. Beatrice adjusted the baby's blanket carefully. The tiny face peeked out again. Those eyes, dark, focused, unmistakable. Victoria stepped slightly forward now, her voice lower than before. "Stefan, what is she talking about?" He didn't look at her, because if he did, he would see realization forming. "I didn't know," he repeated, weaker this time. Beatrice inhaled slowly. "Didn't know?" she echoed. Her voice cracked faintly, not dramatically, just enough. "You stopped answering." The courtroom quieted further. Even the faint shuffle of papers seemed distant now. The baby stirred, making a soft, uncertain sound. Beatrice kissed her head instinctively. "I'm not here to fight," she continued carefully. "I'm here because my daughter deserves to exist on paper." That sentence shifted something, not just in Stefan, in the room. Victoria's posture stiffened. Halpern looked down at his files, flipping through pages quickly as if the answer might be hiding there. The judge's gaze sharpened. "This court requires evidence," he said firmly. Beatrice nodded. "I brought it." She reached into her coat pocket carefully, not rushed, not theatrical. Her hand trembled slightly as she pulled out a sealed envelope. The faint crinkle of paper echoed louder than it should have. Halpern stepped forward immediately. "Your Honor, we object to any unverified documents being—" "It's verified," Beatrice replied quietly. She held the envelope toward the bailiff. "Court admissible. Conducted last week." Stefan felt something drop inside his chest. Last week. That meant she had already prepared, already decided. The bailiff handed the envelope to the judge. The sound of it being opened seemed amplified. Paper sliding free. Silence pressing down. The judge read silently at first, then slower, his brows tightening slightly. Stefan's pulse thundered in his ears. Victoria's breathing became audible beside him. "Stefan," she whispered again, this time not confused. Accusing. The judge looked up. "This document indicates a 99.9% probability of paternity." No gasps, No shouting, just stillness. The baby made a small cooing sound, as if unaware she had just been confirmed. Stefan felt his throat constrict. He stared at Beatrice. "You did this without telling me," he said hoarsely. Her response was immediate. "You left without asking." That landed. Clean. Victoria stepped back slightly. Her hand no longer touched him. "Is this true?" she asked quietly. Stefan didn't answer. Because numbers don't lie, and resemblance doesn't either. He looked at the baby again, and this time, there was no denial left to cling to. The judge placed the document down carefully. "Mr. Volkova," he said evenly, "it appears your petition omitted critical information." Omitted. The word felt surgical, precise. Stefan's composure began to fracture visibly now. He wasn't thinking about media, or investors, or reputation. He was thinking about the moment in Brooklyn when she told him not to let success build him instead. And realizing it had. Victoria had built her life on clarity, family legacy, reputation, precision. She did not tolerate uncertainty. But right now, uncertainty stood between her and the man she agreed to marry. She stared at the DNA report on the judge's bench, then at the infant, then at Stefan. "Tell me," she said quietly, not loudly, not hysterically, just directly. "Did you know there was a possibility?" Stefan's lips parted. He looked smaller somehow, less polished. He started, then stopped. Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly. "You were married," she said slowly. "You told me it was brief. You told me there were no attachments." The word attachments felt cold in the room. Beatrice flinched faintly. Victoria noticed. Her gaze shifted toward Beatrice for the first time fully. Not with hatred, with assessment. "You're his wife?" she asked. "Legally, yes," Beatrice replied softly. "Until today." Victoria absorbed that. "You didn't know she was pregnant?" She pressed. Stefan swallowed. "I left before." He hesitated. Before anything was confirmed, Beatrice let out a faint breath through her nose. "That's one way to describe it." Victoria looked back at him slowly. "You never thought to check?" That question cut deeper than accusation. Stefan's silence answered. Victoria's posture straightened, not defensive, resolute. "I told you," she said, voice tightening slightly. "I don't want ghosts. There are no—" Stefan began. She raised a hand. "Don't." The room was so quiet now that even the baby's soft breathing felt amplified. Victoria's composure cracked just slightly around the edges. "You stood in interviews and talked about legacy," she said carefully, "about family values." A faint tremor entered her voice. "And this?" Stefan looked at the floor. Because there was no angle to defend from. Victoria turned toward Beatrice again. Her expression softened just a fraction. "How old is she?" 8 weeks, Beatrice answered. Victoria nodded slowly. 8 weeks. That timeline calculated itself instantly. While she was planning engagement announcements, there was a newborn in Brooklyn. The realization didn't make her loud. It made her distant. She stepped half a pace away from Stefan. Not dramatically, but decisively. Stefan had spoken on global stages, negotiated multi-million-dollar expansions, handled hostile investors, fielded aggressive media questioning. But this stripped him. There were no rehearsed responses, no strategic pivots, no curated statements, just fact. A child existed. His child. He stared at the baby again, at the familiar shape of her eyes, and something cracked open inside him. Not reputation, not fear of media, recognition. "She looks like me," he whispered before he could stop himself. Beatrice didn't smile. "She is you," she said gently. The truth didn't sound triumphant. It sounded tired. Stefan's shoulders sagged slightly. His attorney leaned in. "We can request a continuance," Halpern murmured urgently. But Stefan didn't respond, because continuance meant delay. And delay meant prolonging a truth that had already arrived. The judge cleared his throat. Mr. Volkova, do you contest the findings presented? Stefan opened his mouth, closed it. His throat worked. No, he said finally. The word was barely audible. Victoria inhaled sharply. The admission landed. Not dramatic, not explosive, just final. Stefan felt exposed in a way success had never prepared him for. There was no negotiating paternity, no reframing omission as strategy. He had left. He had not asked. He had assumed silence meant absence. Now silence meant consequence. He looked at Beatrice. For the first time, not defensively, but with something closer to regret. I didn't know, he said again, though it sounded smaller now. You didn't look, she replied quietly. That difference lingered. The judge leaned back slightly in his chair, absorbing the shift. This was no longer a procedural divorce. This was correction of record. Stefan felt something destabilize inside him. Not his empire, not his finances, his narrative. The story he had told about himself. Self-made, disciplined, forward-moving, now interrupted by a life he hadn't accounted for. And for a man who controlled outcomes, that loss of control shook him more than the courtroom ever could. The judge had seen complicated divorces before, hidden accounts, contested estates, years of resentment spilling into public record. But this was different. He removed his glasses slowly, looked from Stefan to Victoria, to Beatrice holding the newborn. You filed a petition stating there were no minor children connected to this marriage, he said evenly. Stefan did not attempt to interrupt. Yes, Your Honor, Halpern began carefully. At the time of filing, Mr. Volkova was unaware. Unaware does not eliminate responsibility, the judge cut in calmly. The word responsibility lingered in the air. Beatrice felt her grip tighten instinctively around her daughter. The judge's gaze settled on her. Ma'am, why did you not respond earlier to the filing? She swallowed. Her voice didn't rise. I was served recently, she replied, and I needed proof before I stood here. A small nod from the bench, measured, reasonable. The judge looked back at the DNA report again. This court cannot finalize a dissolution under inaccurate disclosure. Stefan's pulse thudded in his ears. The path he had assumed was clean, was no longer simple. You will need to amend your petition, the judge continued, and address custodial and paternal matters formally. The word paternal struck differently. It wasn't optional. It wasn't abstract. It was legal, binding. Victoria inhaled slowly beside Stefan. Not angry now, just aware of consequences she had not calculated. The judge leaned back. Mr. Volkova, is there anything you wish to state before this court determines next steps? All eyes shifted to Stefan. He opened his mouth, and nothing came, because for the first time there was no strategic answer, only truth. And truth does not perform well under pressure. Outside the courthouse, reporters had already begun gathering. Word travels quickly in Manhattan, especially when a billionaire divorce is involved. Inside, the air remained taut. Beatrice shifted her weight slightly. Her daughter blinked up at the high ceiling, unaware of the room's gravity. The judge's attention returned to her. Mrs. Volkova, he said, are you seeking financial compensation or retroactive support? There it was. The assumption, the narrative most people would expect. Money, public leverage, settlement. The courtroom waited. Victoria waited. Even Stefan braced himself. Beatrice inhaled slowly. She looked at Stefan once, not with fury, not with triumph, just steadiness. No, she said. The word surprised even her attorney. I am not requesting money today. A faint murmur moved through the room. Halpern blinked. Victoria's brows drew together slightly. Stefan looked confused. Then what are you requesting? The judge asked. Beatrice adjusted the blanket gently around her daughter. I want her legally acknowledged, she replied softly. Her birth certificate amended. His name recorded. She paused. Her voice wavered just slightly, and shared paternal rights established, not hidden. The room absorbed that. No demand for wealth, no spectacle, No attempt to damage, just record. Stefan felt something inside him shift. He had prepared for accusation, for financial threat, for public humiliation. He had not prepared for restraint. "You're not asking for support?" Victoria asked quietly, almost incredulous. Beatrice shook her head. "I can provide for her," she said calmly. "But she deserves her father present on paper, and in life." Stefan's throat tightened. That was harder to face than any demand. Because money could be transferred. Responsibility could not. The judge nodded slowly. "This court will order immediate amendment of the petition. Mr. Volkova, you are required to initiate formal acknowledgement of paternity and engage in custody mediation." The gavel struck lightly, not explosive, just decisive. Outside, camera shutters began clicking as word spread that proceedings had stalled. Inside, Stefan felt destabilized in a way no business loss had ever achieved. She didn't want his empire. She wanted his presence, and that required something he had neglected: accountability. Beatrice shifted the baby higher against her shoulder. She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She simply stood. Stefan looked at her, and for the first time since Brooklyn, he understood that success had not erased his past. It had only delayed it. And now, it stood in front of him, wrapped in white, breathing softly, waiting. The courtroom emptied slowly, not chaotic, just controlled movement. Attorneys gathering folders, observers whispering, reporters already positioning themselves outside. Victoria stood still longer than anyone else. Her posture remained upright, but something behind her eyes had shifted. She didn't look at Stefan immediately. Instead, she studied Beatrice, the baby, the steadiness, the absence of spectacle. Then, she turned to Stefan. "You knew enough to ask," she said quietly. It wasn't loud. It wasn't accusatory. It was disappointed. "I didn't know," he replied automatically. She tilted her head slightly. "You didn't check." The difference mattered. He had no response. Victoria glanced toward the courtroom doors where camera flashes flickered faintly from outside. "You told me your past was clean," she continued softly. "You said there were no attachments." His throat tightened. "I thought it was over." "It wasn't," she replied. "You just walked away." The words weren't cruel. They were accurate. She removed the engagement ring slowly. Not dramatic, not thrown, just lifted from her finger with steady hands. "I won't marry a man who edits reality when it becomes inconvenient," she said. Her voice trembled faintly, the only sign this cost her something. Stefan stared at the ring in her palm. "Victoria, please." She shook her head. "No." A pause. "I can handle mistakes," she added. "I cannot build a future on a mission." She stepped back fully now. Distance established. "Take responsibility," she said quietly. "Not for the press. For her." Her eyes flicked briefly toward the infant. Then she turned and walked toward the exit. Stefan did not follow, because some departures are final, and chasing them only proves the point. Beatrice was adjusting the baby's blanket when she heard footsteps approach. She didn't turn immediately. She already knew. "Beatrice." His voice sounded different, less polished, less controlled. She faced him slowly. Victoria was gone. Halpern was speaking to court staff in the distance. For the first time since she entered, it was just the two of them, and the child between them. Stefan swallowed hard. "I didn't know," he began again, but the words felt thin even to him. She didn't argue this time. She just waited. "I should have checked," he corrected quietly. "That was closer." "I thought you moved on," he added. "I thought, if something serious had happened, you would have told me." She gave a faint, tired smile. "I tried." He winced. The memory of missed calls resurfaced. Unread messages. Postcards sent instead of conversations. His voice dropped. "I was building everything." "And you left everything," she replied softly. There was no venom in it. Just fact. He glanced down at the baby. "Can the first?" He hesitated. "Can I hold her?" The question lingered. Beatrice studied his face carefully, searching, not for perfection, for intention. After a moment, she shifted the baby slightly, supporting her head, then placing her gently into his arms. Stefan froze for half a second. She was smaller than he expected, warmer, real. The baby blinked up at him, eyes unfocused but calm. His breath hitched. "Hi," he whispered. His voice cracked. He hadn't prepared for that, for the weight of her, for the undeniable resemblance. Beatrice watched quietly. No triumph, no accusation, just observation. "I'm sorry," he said again, barely above a whisper. "For not asking, for not checking, for assuming." She nodded slowly. "I'm not here for apologies," she replied. He looked up at her. Then why? For her. The simplicity unsettled him more than anger would have. He shifted awkwardly, adjusting his hold on the baby. "I can provide anything she needs," he said quickly. "School, trust funds, security." She shook her head gently. "She needs presence." The words settled heavily. He inhaled slowly. "I want to fix this." She met his eyes steadily. "You can't fix what already happened." A pause. "But you can decide what happens next." He swallowed. "Do you want to try again?" The question came out fragile, unexpected, and for the first time, she almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was late. "You think this is about us?" she asked softly. He didn't answer, because somewhere inside, he had hoped. She stepped closer slightly, lowered her voice. "I loved you," she said gently, "but I built strength in your absence." The words weren't meant to wound. They were meant to close something. "I'm not the woman you left in Brooklyn." He felt that truth physically, in his chest, in his throat. "I know," he whispered. And for the first time, he truly did. Stefan was still holding the baby when he asked it. "Do you want to try again?" His voice wasn't confident. It wasn't strategic. It was uncertain. Beatrice watched him carefully, watched the way he held their daughter now, cautiously, almost reverently. Watched the way guilt softened his posture. And for a brief second, a memory flickered. Brooklyn rooftops, late-night laughter, a promise whispered in the dark. "You are my family." Her throat tightened. That version of him felt so distant now. She stepped closer, not to comfort him, but to be clear. "I loved who you were," she said gently, "but I cannot build a future on who you might become." He inhaled sharply. "I've changed," he insisted quietly. "Yes," she agreed. "You have." A pause, but not in the direction I needed. The words landed without anger, without performance, just truth. "You left," she continued softly, "not because you didn't love me, but because ambition mattered more than stability." He didn't deny it, because denial would have been dishonest. She adjusted the baby's blanket slightly. "I forgave you a long time ago," she added. His eyes lifted. "You did?" "I had to. For my own peace." A small breath escaped her. But forgiveness isn't reconciliation. That distinction settled heavily. He looked down at the baby again. "So, there's no chance?" She shook her head slowly. "No." The word wasn't cruel. It was complete. "You can be her father," she continued, "but you cannot return as my partner." His shoulders dropped slightly, acceptance creeping in, because, deep down, he knew she wasn't reacting. She was choosing. And there's power in that. The hallway outside the courtroom had quieted slightly. Most of the media noise had moved toward the building's entrance. Stefan handed the baby back carefully. His movements slower now, deliberate. "What do you want the arrangement to look like?" he asked. Not defensively, not arrogantly, genuinely. Beatrice shifted the infant against her shoulder. "I want consistency," she replied. "Define that." She met his eyes. Scheduled visitation, mediation through the court, shared decision-making. He nodded slowly. "And financially," she paused. "Legally appropriate support," she said evenly, "not as leverage, as responsibility." That hit differently, because earlier she had refused spectacle. Now she was refusing pride. Balanced, measured. Halpern approached cautiously. "We can draft preliminary custody terms immediately." Stefan nodded without looking at him. "I'll cooperate," he said quietly. Beatrice studied him one more time. "Don't cooperate because the judge ordered it," she said softly. "Cooperate because she exists." The baby made a small sound as if punctuating the sentence. Stefan swallowed. "I will." For once, it didn't sound like a performance. It sounded like someone who understood consequences. When Beatrice stepped outside the courthouse, the air felt colder than before. Reporters stood behind a soft barrier. Cameras raised. "Mrs. Volkova, are you seeking a settlement? Is this about money?" She didn't stop walking. She didn't raise her voice. She simply said, "This is about acknowledgement, nothing more." The word traveled quickly. Stefan emerged minutes later. Flashbulbs burst around him, but he wasn't looking at cameras. He was watching Beatrice reach the bottom of the courthouse steps, watching her adjust the blanket around their daughter, watching her pause briefly before stepping into the street. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about headlines. He was thinking about Sunday visits, about missed milestones, about a chance to show up differently. Beatrice reached the sidewalk. She looked down at her daughter. "You did good," she whispered softly. The baby blinked up at her, unaware of legal victories, unaware of public narratives, just breathing, alive. Beatrice inhaled deeply. The city noise felt distant now. What mattered wasn't revenge. It wasn't humiliation. It wasn't winning. It was record. It was truth. It was dignity. She didn't look back, not because she was bitter, but because she was finished revisiting what had already been decided. And as she walked forward into the Manhattan afternoon, she understood something clearly. Sometimes love doesn't end in marriage. It ends in truth. If this story moved you, if you believe dignity matters more than pride, if you believe silence does not erase responsibility, then like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Comment below, should Beatrice have handled it differently, or was standing up the only option? And subscribe to Mr. Austin Love and Story Tales, because some lessons aren't about revenge, they're about accountability and the courage to show up, decided. And as she walked forward into the Manhattan afternoon, she understood something clearly. Sometimes love doesn't end in marriage. It ends in truth. If this story moved you, if you believe dignity matters more than pride, if you believe silence does not erase responsibility, then like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Comment below, should Beatrice have handled it differently, or was standing up the only option? And subscribe to Mr. Austin Love and Story Tales, because some lessons aren't about revenge, they're about accountability and the courage to show up.
If you enjoy American Love Stories, please consider subscribing and comment what you need next. And love you all from Mr. Austin.